If you had $1,000 to make the best coffee brewing setup, what would you spend the money on?
Most of my money would go towards a grinder. To unlock that final 10%, I believe that is in sorting, so pre-grinding management and post-grinding management. What does that mean? It means, hi, my name is Tom Hutchins. I'm the head of training at Code Black Coffee and 3-time Australian Brewers Cup Champion. And this is my filter brewing masterclass. We need to understand what that coffee can taste like. So to achieve that, I rip open the bag. I even have a little nibble of a bean.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Rowan Cook. I make coffee on the internet.
And I'm Ben Bicknell. I judge people who make coffee, but only at competitions.
And together we are
It's Just Coffee,
the podcast for people who know it's never just coffee. Now, Benny boy, filter coffee, right? I have to say, making like a good filter coffee is pretty easy.
It is. You know, you get some good coffee, some good water, kind of a reasonable recipe, and you're most of the way there. And I have to admit, I get pretty lazy. Probably that's about where I call it most of the time.
Yeah, but making that decent cup is one thing. But I think when you start looking at the pros, it's that last 10% or even that last 1% that takes like a lifetime of dedication to kind of master.
Yeah, look, you know, judging in the barista competition, I know how difficult it is for people to get even that last 1%, let alone 10% better. So there's a big stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. But we are lucky enough to be joined today by Tom Hutchins, the head of training at Code Black Coffee, one of Melbourne's top specialty coffee shops, 3 times Australian Brewers Champion, and represented Australia on the world stage. Welcome to the pod, Tom Hutchins.
Hey, good to be here.
Nice.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Woo. So glad to have you here to tell us what's actually important with filter and what we can stop obsessing about.
Love to share all my golden little nuggets with you today.
Yeah, this is going to be an amazing like masterclass for the listeners here. I know for myself, I'd put myself as that like, I can make a decent cup and know some basics, but I feel like today I'm really going to level that up and put some of those learnings into action.
Improve what you just brewed for us.
Oh, well, look.
I don't judge people just at competitions, turns out. I also judge
I'm
Rowan.
going to say before we started recording, Ben sat here and said, oh, this is delicious. So, you know, I'm being thrown under the bus here, but we'll start off with just something a little bit more fun. What's the weirdest way you've ever brewed a coffee?
Oh, the weirdest way I've ever brewed a coffee? Yeah, it's probably a mortar and pestle. Just, you know, get it ground, get it some sort of soluble.
Why did this
material.
happen? Why were you using
No grinder, I think.
Oh,
I had
right.
good coffee, no grinder. Just needed to smash it up. Added some hot water, try to sift it out with maybe like a tea bag. If you empty out a tea bag and pour like a bit of hot liquid through it, you can
were you
kind
getting
of
any
filter.
infused flavors there? We can a little Earl
A little
Grey
bit of
in
tea
your
left
coffee
over,
as
sure.
well.
But yeah, that's probably the weirdest one. It's like it's in a friend's house probably with some good coffee and no grinder.
Yeah, but that makes sense.
just
When you
smash
get there and you're like, I've got the good bag, you're like, we've got to do something with it here.
Yeah.
And how was it?
Hey,
Yeah.
you know, like 80% of the way there. Like
Hey.
start with good coffee and usually your cup's pretty good.
Yeah, it's the big stretch there. Yeah, look, you've competed a whole heap and obviously have all these amazing titles. Congratulations. Some great successes there on the competition stage, representing Australia 3 times. I think a lot of people kind of from the outside look at competitors, look at the world stage and go, wow, you just woke up as a fully formed world champion. But in reality, obviously, it's a big journey, lots of failures, lots of learnings. How has your coffee brewing kind of an approach changed over the years, and especially, I guess, with that step into competition?
Yeah, I think when you start brewing filter coffee, and this is true for me, it's a lot about recipes and technique and just trying to get things right. I think we often obsess over equipment as well. Like, oh, maybe if I buy that, it'll taste better. Maybe if I buy that, it'll taste better. That was definitely me at the beginning. It's just like Googling famous recipes, trying to follow them, brewing a coffee, wondering why it tasted just okay. That's where I started. And then I think over my career of brewing a lot of coffee every single day, it's no longer about, okay, what exact recipe here, what exact piece of equipment here. It's more of a holistic understanding of extraction efficiency. I find myself saying a lot, like how efficient are we being in our extraction? And it seems like the basics just become more and more important. Like understanding that good coffee brewed at a good temperature with decent water, with a pretty standard normal ratio, you're going to have a pretty delicious cup of coffee.
Kind of reassuring to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Why were you getting a little nervous over there, Ben? You know,
what am I going to have to do?
I mean, there's lots of little, when it comes to competition, for sure, lots of little tricks, little tips, one percenters where we go pretty crazy in competition, like, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do find myself separating my advice for competition from cafe, from home brewing. You mentioned yourself being kind of a little lazy at home. I think that's okay. At home, it shouldn't be as stressful as it was in Jakarta last year. It should be enjoyable. You're in love with coffee, so you should love the process.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, you were talking about it just then about, you know, people looking for what's the best brewing equipment. And we often ask people like, what's the best brewer or what is it? And the answer always comes back of, well, it depends. And it's kind of like, well, it depends on what. So I'm kind of thinking like, what makes some of the best brewing equipment in your eyes, both for home and cafe? And where does it make sense to start looking at different methods? Like, why would you use a different type of brewer?
Sure. I think there's large categories of different brewers. Obviously, conical, flatbed, if it's a percolation brew, if it's an immersion brew, these are probably the big ones. So when I'm looking to understand if a brewer is something that I want, it needs to fill a gap that I haven't already filled. So to buy another conical brewer of the same material with almost no difference to the one that I currently have, I don't know. It could just be that I'm excited by it because it's a new thing and it's trendy. And there's some validity to that if you are excited to brew. So if that's what you need to do to be excited to brew, go for it. But I think generally what I look for in a brewer is something that is consistent, trust it, it is accessible, and it inspires me. It looks cool. I want to pick it up. I just feel good about it. So that's what I look for.
But then let's say I'm at home, right? I've got a V60. I always use a V60. And then I'm like, do I need to get a flatbed? Why? What would push me to be like, let me go out and buy a flatbed brewer?
Depends on what profile that you prefer, really, and the way that you like to brew. I brew mostly with conical brewers. I prefer them. They make a lot of sense to me. I feel like I understand the way it should look and how to respond to it. So I find myself, and I also like the complexity of a conical brewer. Seems to be maybe different levels of extraction in the cup, encouraged by its natural, like, uneven funnel shape, I guess. So as a result, you get a more complex profile, which is quite compelling. So I'm looking for that in my brew. So when would you buy a flat bottom brewer? You want to try something new, but borrow one from a friend. Try it out a couple of times. If you notice that you don't pick it up and you're not using it, give it to someone else. Like, let them go through that. Like, collecting like 30 plus different brewers does not a good coffee make.
Nice. I think we'll get into it a little bit later in the podcast as well, but I think there's also a value in like the ease of use or simplicity depending on what stage you're at, right? Like, I'm a huge fan of the Clever coffee drippers, which are pretty much an immersion brewer, but through a filter paper and kind of drain through. And I think for an entry level, like either home or even entry level single cup in a cafe, they're super easy, right? Coffee in, water in, let it steep, done, you know. And the same with like calitas and flatbed kind of, you know, in a cafe, I find they're a little more forgiving. Maybe they don't come out with the complexity. So it's almost like choosing your device depending on your skill level.
I love a full immersion brewer. Yeah, like that.
Well, the Clever's cool because I know like at a certain point there was a lot of like the side of French press doesn't have to suck. And then
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like, make it and then pour it through a V60. And the Clever Dripper is kind of like that, just in one device, right? It's
Yeah.
like you can brew it in immersion and then it can just pull through once you're done, once you're ready.
There's a reason the Hario switch is super, super popular amongst competitors and home brewers alike. I think the Hario switch is very similar to the Clever Dripper in some ways, maybe with even a little more flexibility.
Yep.
But super easy to teach someone who doesn't know how to make coffee. Like, just do this, open it up.
That's why quite cool with the switch, right? Because the switch is like the V60, but it's got a little metal like ball at the bottom that can open and close. So that kind of allows you could do a brew that is both immersion and like pour through in one, right?
That's right. Yeah, percolation and immersion combined. We call them hybrid brewers. You could just use it as a normal 60, really. Yeah.
What's this one that I've seen? Have you seen this binocular brewer? Have you seen this? Where
Yeah.
it's like two...
Oh, yeah.
It's like one plate with two brewers on it.
Yep.
Is that for like multiple, like to put two different coffees in and blend together yourself? What's it for? Or do we not know?
I don't really know.
I think I've seen it. You can put, two different coffees in.
Yeah.
This is a response to a blending trend that was first, I think, made probably most famous by Matt Winton when he won with a blend in the Brewers Cup. So there is now a trend of blending multiple competition coffees together to try to get more points on the competition score sheet. So like, maybe I'll take the acid from this coffee and then like the sweetness from this one and a bit of aroma from this one. Like that's the idea. So that dripper that you're talking about is that, but without mixing the raw material together. So the idea is you can actually brew them.
Two different recipes.
You could have
they're
like,
supposed
two
to.
different recipes,
Interesting.
temperature, grind size, all that kind of thing.
I think we're going to be checking it out soon, so it'll be fun.
Yeah,
to,
in Dubai.
I want to taste the results. I almost want to have two cups underneath it, and like side by side.
I
and
mean,
then a blend.
this might come out after Dubai, so maybe we've already done it and you've heard about it. But
maybe we
if
know
so,
exactly what we're talking about.
So now you've said, it's going to depend on what brewer and you don't want to really push people down that path, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. You got $1,000 making the perfect home brewing setup for filter coffee. What are you buying?
Okay. Right. My first $700 going to my grinder, the Onesie Presso ZP6, and my kettle, going to be the Fellow Stag.
So they're $350 each.
Yep. So that's up to $700 already. Then I'm going to buy a digital scale. We'll do a Time More Black Mirror.
Just over 100.
Yep. And how much money do I have left?
You got $200.
$200 left. Okay, I'm buying my papers. I'm getting some standard slow papers, Cafec preferably. I'm getting some faster papers as well, Sybaris, Del Hario, they work. And then I'm doing a WDT tool. I'm getting a brewer, fairly affordable plastic V60. And then
So probably at about 900 there.
900. And then a couple little bits and bobs. So maybe like a little air duster, little sorting tray, cute little dosing cup. Yeah, and then I think we're there.
Yeah.
Nice. And this is Australian dollars, everyone.
Yeah, AUD.
Yeah, like after my $1,000 on my equipment, I would spend at least $1,000 on coffee, like over a certain period of time, right? Because I think that, spending more of your money on coffee is definitely going to result in a better cup.
Right. So would you say maybe even like if you only had 1,000, maybe only spend 500 on the setup and then 500 on good coffee?
Yeah, $1 for equipment, $1 for coffee. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good way to live it. I like that.
A 1-to-1 ratio. That's the coffee to equipment.
I've got that $8,000 mini over there. So you don't need to spend $8,000 on coffee.
Yes.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Let's get your price for cup down. Yeah. Yeah, unless you just love equipment. If equipment is what you love, spend more money on equipment. If coffee is what you love, spend more money on coffee.
Yeah. You can tell this is someone who's talked about these questions back and forth because you're so diplomatic where you're like, but if equipment just gets you going, then that's fine. Be a person that gets equipment.
Yeah. There's always a caveat and validity.
Yeah. I'd always say like making sure you've got some reasonable scales so you can actually figure out your brew ratio.
You can get them pretty cheap now.
Yeah, some digital scales. Get yourself, the grinder is critical. The brewing method can be pretty cheap, right? Like whether it be a V60 or, as we said, even like a clever coffee dripper, like $20 or $30 or something. And then also having like sometimes the temperature controllable kettle You
Yeah,
know, that's
for
probably
sure.
a good thing. And especially if you're doing a V60, having something that's got a good pouring spout to it. Because if you're just using your average kind of electric kettle, it's going to get super hot. It's probably going to taste a little bit like plastic. And then when you're pouring, you're going to be doing lots of blobbing.
Yeah.
The blob technique.
Yeah, there's some dispersion tools that are relatively cheap that can help you at that point. So there's like a Kmart kettle where you can heat it up to different temperatures, like pretty standard, like tea kettle for home. So you could get like to 90, 93 degrees, and then you could use a drip assist or something like that.
Is that like the little shower heady kind
Yeah,
of things
that's
that
right.
you pour into?
That's a cool idea.
Relatively affordable, like really affordable, really, compared to like a kettle or grinder. And then you could have less blobs, have more evenness. So yeah, I often recommend that for people who are like, oh, I don't know, my kettle, it's $100, $200. What do I do?
Yeah. It's a good idea.
So that's really cool. So instead of buying like an expensive gooseneck temperature controlled thing for like $100 to $300, you can go out and buy like a $20 Kmart kettle and then just like a little plastic dispersion head.
Yeah,
and
the Hario Drip Assist is less than $30.
there you go.
Nice little hack there. If you don't want to replace your entire kettle either.
Yeah.
You've already got one on the bench.
And what about like if someone was looking at a hand grinder, is there one that kind of pops to mind for you that you like?
Yeah, best bang for buck. Onesie Presso ZP6 is still my number one recommendation. It isn't cheap. It is $350 or so, but very clean and competitive when it comes to the top end electric grinders. Like we're talking like multi-$1,000 grinders. ZP6 holds strong. Now, I would always be honest with myself if I'm brewing at home, or it depends where I'm brewing, right? If we're assuming home right now, do you want to hand grind every morning? If you have that thought of, can't be bothered doing that right now, I just won't, then maybe a hand grinder is not for you. So any sort of barrier that you notice, like, oh, I don't want to, like maybe hand grinder's not it. Hand grinders are great for aroma. I kind of like the ritual, kind of feels like it's okay. It takes time. I'm not brewing a filter coffee in a rush usually. But an electric grinder at home can help, can make you want to brew more. I'm using one at the moment because I want to brew my delicious coffee as soon as possible. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think there's a good setup there for getting entry in, or like even in that kind of good mid pocket without going crazy on like multiple $1,000 grinders and things like that. Yeah. So like most of the people listening to the podcast are from the work in the industry and have brewed a bunch of filter coffee, I'm sure. And like we talked about, it's pretty easy to get to pretty good coffee. But leveling up to that exceptional or like world comp stage can be pretty difficult. So making a 7 out of 10 coffee is pretty easy. How do we get to the 9 out of 10 stage? Where should people be really putting their energy?
Sure. So let's assume we have a great coffee. Let's assume we have like a 10 out of 10 coffee, right? So to unlock that final 10%, right now, I believe that is in sorting, so pre-grinding management and post-grinding management. What does that mean? It means taking a second to look at your raw material before you grind it. If there's any defects, any funny looking beans, anything too dark, too light, anything that looks like it shouldn't really be there, take a moment to take that out. In competition, it becomes a sorting competition at a certain point. This is true for every discipline, from what I understand. So we spend hours and hours and days looking at kilos of coffee, sorting. There's two ways to sort. You can sort out or you can sort to brew. Sorting to brew is much easier in filter. Sorting to brew in barista is a little bit different. So sorting out or sorting to brew. This will help improve your cup a lot. If you want to understand what those things you're sorting out taste like, brew them.
So just a pile of all the defects and just throw them in. Yeah, great.
Confirm your bias here, right? Brew it. Accept that you're really biased, that it's not going to taste very good. So accept that. Okay. We taste it. Okay. It tastes like we thought. It's not representative of the coffee. Usually more of a peanuts, usually like unripe fruits, this sort of flavor. So we don't want that in our cup. Let's take it out. So that's pre-grinding management. Post-grinding management includes chaff and fines removal. So chaff is essentially the skin of the coffee after we roast it. It's super obvious in washed coffee, so there's a lot more chaff. Sometimes it ends up going everywhere. And you're like, why is my kitchen counter covered in this stuff? When we remove the chaff, we remove some nutty qualities. Again, if you really want to know what it tastes like, you can put it in your mouth or you could brew it. If you brew chaff or you put it in your mouth, it tastes like nuts.
Yep.
So remove that. And then you have, you're set up for success.
How are we removing when we get to that post-grinding? Because I know you can get like sieves. So are we going hardcore with like a certain micron sieve, or are we just getting like a flour sieve out here? What are the ways that are the easiest to get rid of it?
So let's start with like at home. So quickly at home, what I will do if I have a stainless steel dosing cup, I will just use my finger around the outside of the dose to remove any of that extra chaff. And I'll also give my grinds a little bit of a blow. So we're literally just blowing on it. This is going to only remove that light chaff, but leave behind all the good stuff.
It's almost like the chaff from the wheat kind of throwing up into the air with the chaff kind of blowing off.
Yeah. Now, this does make a bit of a mess. So doing it outside, if you're lucky enough to have a backyard, it's better. Otherwise, over a sink or over a bin or just don't make too much of a mess. So this is going to help. When we do it in competition, so the other extreme, this is when the sieves come out. This is when we're still using our finger. We're still blowing, actually. We're backstage, literally like going crazy, like chaff going everywhere. But we also might use there's a fellow shaker that removes anything under 200 microns. There's also other tools on market. This will help you remove your fines. Removing fines can improve your evenness of your extraction, give you more flavor fidelity. If you overdo it, it might be too clean. And then you might struggle to get those flavors that you're trying to get points for. So you can overdo it. Yeah.
Would those fines be, I've found sometimes with certain coffees, I'm grinding what feels like super coarse, but I can still see the fines in there when I'm grinding that coursing. And it's like, it'll run fast at the start, but then it chokes up. Is that the fines that are kind of causing that, or what's happening?
Yeah, it's a combination of fines and anything like your paper, effectively. It's fines in your paper.
Yeah.
Now, every single grind sample will have a massive net of grind sizes. If you've ever seen like a grind size analysis of like a little bit of filter coffee grinds, you'll see that there's a lot of fines for some grinders. There's a lot of big boys, I call them, like big boulders. And then there's hopefully some sort of trend in the middle where we have some sort of target. But once you understand that it is a pretty large net of grind sizes, you accept that there will be fines almost no matter what. And then you do what you can to try to work with them. So fast papers are becoming more and more popular because they reduce the clogging that you're talking about. Sometimes we want to increase the speed of our drawdown. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we like when it like goes a little bit slower and it's like got a lot more contact time. It depends on the coffee, depends on the context.
And what about if you have a grinder that has like the little, what is it, where like the chaff will stick to the inside? It's like the little static thing. Is it, if you're grinding, because you'll just get it all out, is it better to kind of get your grinds and get another cup and then do it separately? Or
yeah, I do that. Yeah, we do that. I do that. So when you're grinding your coffee, let's say we're using an EK. I'm sure most people have used an EK if you've worked in a cafe that sells single origin coffee. So we grind the sample. Before we grind, actually, we always purge at the new grind size with like 4 beans of the new coffee that we're using. So that removes any leftover coffee from the previous grind. And then we grind our main sample. Then after that, yes, I would use another cup to catch anything that comes out after. It is mostly chaff. Yeah. It is not really what we want in our main sample. So that is one way to minimize it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Marco Beverage Systems.
I tell you what, baristas are the unsung heroes. They get absolutely slammed every single day.
It's true. They do. They get hammered. And you know what? Like, we've just accepted that standing there steaming jug after jug after jug of milk is just kind of part of the deal.
Marco is trying to remove some of that daily slog from the cafe for baristas.
They are. They have designed the Milk Pal.
The Milk Pal!
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. At the push of a button, you can get hot milk, hot foam, cold foam.
Oh, that's sick. So you can just pour it straight out.
Yeah, you choose the exact texture you want and the volume you need, and away you go.
Oh, that's perfect. It also does it, though, with alternative milk and dairy, whatever you're using. And the best part is, as you said, no waste. You're not tipping milk down the drain and just wasting money.
Never a good thing.
And it gives baristas the time to do the things that they actually want to do, not just stuck behind a steam wand.
So if it sounds like a good fit for your business, go check out marcobeveragesystems.com, learn a little bit more about it, maybe find your new Milk Pal.
Okay, so let's say we're starting from scratch. A new bag of beans appears on your bench. You want to start dialing it in and getting it ready, but there are so many variables that we need to look at, and we need to start figuring out, like, what are the important ones? Where do you start? So the first question is, you've got your new bag, you're dialing it in. Which is the most important variable to start looking at?
Most important variable when it comes to brewing like a new bag of coffee, first of all, we need to understand what that coffee can taste like.
Mm-hmm.
So to achieve that, I rip open the bag and I try to get some sensory information out of it. So have a smell. You know, we always want to do it anyway. Always sniffing a fresh bag of coffee, like smell it, take note. Look at the color, take note. I even have a little nibble of a bean. Just don't eat too much of a roasted coffee bean.
Nibbling the bean.
You might choke yourself a little bit. But have just a little nibble. And I chew it really quickly and I add like some saliva to it. I pretty much do a mini extraction in my mouth.
Oh my God, it's French press mouth.
What temperature?
What temperature is your saliva extracting at?
37 probably.
This is the fastest way to get some information. So that's what we do. And then based on that information, so I can figure out the roast degree, so how dark it is or how light it is. I can figure out if there is prominent fruit acid present, or if it is mostly just roast sweetness flavors like chocolates and caramels and things like that. I can figure out how fermented it is as well. So if it's tasting particularly fermented fruit rather than fresh fruit, okay, this will inform my first decisions. Then I brew the coffee with a baseline recipe based on that information that I've just quickly attained, right? So the big ones are natural coffees and washed coffees. That's probably the big two. Or how intensely a coffee is fermented, or how soluble or how dense it is. This is another way to ask the same question. So let's assume that it's a natural coffee and it's fairly dark and it's tasting quite fermented. I will brew this coffee with a baseline recipe, maybe with a slightly lower temperature than usual, maybe just under 90. And I will follow a fairly standard set of pours of maybe 4 even pours over like a very specific set of times. So maybe every 30 seconds, maybe every 40 seconds, chunk, 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 just follow that baseline recipe. And then I will taste my coffee and I will try to compare it to what the coffee should or can taste like. Now, to know what a coffee should or can taste like, the best way to do this is to cup the coffee or to do a brewing method that is very standardized. So cupping is used in quality control, obviously, all the time. It is a great way to get everything out of that coffee, to learn how it can taste, all the good stuff, all the stuff that we really like, maybe stuff we don't really like. So that when you're tasting that first baseline brew, you have a reference point. If you don't have a reference point, you find yourself in this very frustrating space of, is it me? Did I make this coffee terrible? Or like you just don't know. And that's really disheartening, I find. As a barista, sometimes you're brewing a coffee and you think, oh, I want this coffee to taste like bubblegum, or I want this coffee to taste like fresh fruit. Maybe you are fighting a losing battle. Maybe that is not going to happen with this coffee. Maybe you've just brewed the best coffee for this bean that anyone has ever brewed, and you didn't know it, right? So that's why I think a reference point is super, super important. Then we make decisions with our big variables to try to match that reference point, things that we like, things that we love, things we want to highlight. So the big ones, obvious ones are ratio. Then I would say extraction efficiency. Extraction efficiency includes, it's a bit of a cop-out answer because it kind of includes everything.
Yeah, come on, get specific, Tom.
No, but this is how this is specific in that you can achieve a similar extraction outcome by, let's say, increasing the agitation in the way that you pour. So sometimes there's a pretty common error in brewing, actually. I see a lot of whipping. So it's like this pouring, like you pouring in circles, but you're doing it in quite a fast and uncontrolled way. This is called whipping, and it does agitate the coffee more, which increases your extraction efficiency, which can be good. It can be a good choice. But if you're not doing that intentionally, then it's no longer a tool you can use. So that is one way to increase your extraction efficiency. Grind size is probably the most common as well, right? We can increase our extraction efficiency by going a bit finer. We can increase it by going a bit hotter as well. There's many ways that we can shift our extraction.
So you were talking about it earlier as well. You were talking about a natural coffee if you were starting from scratch and that you'd maybe drop the temperature. Assumption here being, so it's like washed coffees are going to be harder to extract. Natural or more processed coffees and even darker roasted coffees are maybe easier too. And so that's where you look at those variables.
Yeah, for sure. I think about the solubility and to understand the solubility, you could make the general claims that natural coffee is more soluble, which it often is. Washed coffee a little bit less soluble, sure. But when you're brewing it, it will give you a lot of information. You'll notice that when you're brewing a washed coffee, it will draw down much slower than a natural. Natural is the water is just going to go straight down, like nice and quick. Washed coffee, not so much. So if you're brewing a coffee blind where you don't know what the process is, you're holding yourself back a little bit because you would have a different choice of how you would brew each of these.
Yeah. So that's a kind of cool way. You've got a new bag. If you're really dedicated to it, start with a cupping process to kind of understand it. And that's going to give you better control when you actually get into dialing in with whatever brew method you're using. Super layman kind of stupid one here. You got your new bag of coffee and you're just trying to pick the grind size that you're starting at. Where do you start? How do you make that choice? Are you grinding and looking at it? Are you feeling it? Like, how do you make that call?
So to create a baseline recipe, it is, you need to know the grind size and you need to know the temperature of water. You need to know all these basic things, right? Grind size for filtered coffee is quite coarse. It's like sugar granules, right? Like we should be able to feel it like a little bit coarser than sand. There's a lot of acceptable grind sizes, I would say, in filter coffee. We can change our grind size to increase our efficiency, but generally you just want it to be fairly coarse and you don't want it to be choking so much that it's like not drawing down. This is a good place to start. So start with a coarse grind, should feel like sugar granules. Start with 93-degree water. When it comes to temperature, we just want to be hot enough to extract it efficiently. So around 93 is a good starting point. Good starting ratio, 1:16. This is fairly normal. It's the same as our 50. It's very close to 15 to 250, right? 15 grams coffee, 250, or 60 grams to a liter. This is our starting point. And if your technique is sound, by that I mean you're not doing unintentional things without knowing, like whipping, like we just talked about, then your outcome is going to be pretty close.
I've seen some cool videos online as well where people do like the V60 cut in half with like a perspex on it.
Very cool, yeah.
And it will show you like things that you might not assume. It's like if you pour super close to the water, like from your spout to the water, there'll be like lots of agitation because it's going straight through. But when you pour higher, you feel like visually that might be disrupting it more, but it's actually hitting the surface tension of the water and then not going below and not agitating. So it shows you how the different heights really changes how much you're agitating and doing it. And as you said, with like the whipping versus a slower, more considered pour.
That makes me think of, I think it was probably from one of those videos that you're referring to, but when your coffee bed is dry, so say we finish a pour and we let the water fully draw down and you start pouring then, you create a lot more agitation because the first water that hits the coffee, there's no water to break the agitation, right? Or the impact. So that's something you really need to keep in mind. If you're letting your full coffee bed dry out before each and every pour, you're first of all probably bypassing more liquid and you're causing more agitation. Yeah, it's kind of like a spoon, really. Like using a spoon to swirl it, it's like the gooseneck kettle in some ways is like stirring this coffee bed. And if there's nothing to buffer it,
The other side of the question, we talked about the first things to look at when doing it. What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make, like, or spending too much time worrying about that they shouldn't when brewing filter coffee?
Sure. Ooh, the list is long. I think it's you're changing a lot of variables that are not provable, or you haven't even proven it to yourself yet. So we're changing variables without knowing why is a bit of a red herring. So try to be a bit more consistent and stable with your recipe and then make small changes. One thing might be changing your water for every single brew, for example. I wouldn't recommend changing your water every single brew. I would recommend making a larger batch of water or sourcing a larger amount of water, whether this is from soft and filtered preferably, or if you've created your own, create a larger batch so that is a more consistent variable. But changing it every single time, you start to lose track of what's actually happening. We wouldn't do that with any other variable. We wouldn't change the coffee every time. We wouldn't change the grind size. Yeah.
So basically the idea is like ideally one variable change at a time so that you actually can understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. The annoying thing about this advice as well is if you do a exact brew of the same coffee at the same time with exactly the same parameters in every way that you possibly can, and you give it to someone and say, which one do you like better? They'll always tell you which one they like better. And there is, annoyingly, a difference. So every 15 grams of coffee, this is particularly true in competition coffees or heavily fermented coffees or more exotic coffees that potentially come in vacuum sealed bags. So they create their own little like microclimate. But every bag is tasting a little bit different. Every 15 grams is tasting a little bit different. So in competition, what I do, we grind them all and homogenize everything together and then dish from there. So that's the only way to really get some uniformity. So the reason why we're talking about this though is because doing A/B testing is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about maybe just changing one variable, seeing if we can taste the difference. When you try to keep all the variables the same and it tastes different, then where does that leave you? So annoyingly, A/B testing is kind of like the standard. So we actually have like a homogenous group. So we can actually learn a little bit more about that coffee.
Cool. Have a reference point. I've got one for you. So we were talking about the bed of the coffee grinds after the water's drawn down. There used to be a real trend, and I don't know if it's still there, of almost like reading the tea leaves, but it's reading the shape of your extracted bed of coffee. Is that still something that we should be paying attention to?
You're talking about looking at the bed post-extraction?
Yes.
I think that the bed can give you some good information, but by itself, not so much. So it has to be matched with sensory. So maybe the most common thing that I learned from looking at a coffee bed is the age-old, if it looks muddy, probably also choked, and it probably means you have a lot of fines hanging out, clogging things up. You can kind of see them on top. It just looks like mud. It's like, okay, you've gone a little bit too fine. So let's pull it back. Let's make it a little bit coarser again. We'll get more evenness, and that will taste better in every case. The other thing that I look for in a coffee bed is if it's nice and flat. Now, I want it to be nice and flat because that means it means my final drawdown at the very least was nice and even. So I got even extraction, at least in that last little bit.
Do you do that little swirl after your last pour to ensure that?
Swirl, yeah, to try to remove any like shelves or anything like that happening.
Yep.
That's a good little tip. What else would I look for in a bed? So there's something called a brew bed peak and a brew bed base. The brew bed peak is the mark on the side of your filter paper where your brew got to. So like how high it kind of
high tide line.
breathed in. Yes, exactly right. High tide line. So that's the brew bed peak. Brew bed base is where it is now. Okay. So if your peak is quite high and your base is quite low, that could mean that there was not necessarily as much even extraction as you would have liked. Ideally, you want them to be kind of close together. You want this like welling, like wet saturation of coffee to be happening over like a period of time, right?
Yeah.
But if you have heaps of water in one pour and then maybe not so much in the next and stuff like that, you can get unevenness.
That would suggest a lot of small pours to me, right? Rather than multiple bigger, like up, let it drain, up, let it drain.
Yes. I generally 4 pours is kind of my baseline. But understanding the brew bed peak and the brew bed base can also give you another tool, similar to color and roasting, like external and internal. So kind of think about a similar thing. It can give you a tool if you wanted to decrease your efficiency. You could do that on purpose.
I'll have to test that one out. I'll be reading my my brewing beds from here on out.
Making your brew bed.
The high tide or not. Okay, so, I know as a judge, obviously on the barista side, but it's kind of a similar space, is that one of the biggest challenges is separating like personal preference out, right? We're up there to go objectively, is this a good cup of coffee? And you want to really know the technical quality of it and understanding how a consumer, or in the case of competition, how a judge would receive it. So how should a brewer go about tasting and evaluating the results of their brews to know if they're actually improving it, not just like testing things randomly like we're talking about, or allowing your confirmation bias to go, I brewed this coffee, it's excellent?
Yeah, it's really challenging. When it comes to competition, it's a little bit of a unique world in that there is a score sheet where you must grade like each like part of the coffee. Especially in brewers, we have 6 different flavor categories and 3 different temperature stages. Like, it's pretty wild. So to separate your personal preference, I think your personal preference will always score pretty well. Like, to be honest,
get it.
Yeah. It's like, well, actually, why do I like this coffee? It's like, oh, because the sweetness is quite high and the acidity is really balanced and the aroma was amazing. It's like, okay, so you might be able to score that well. But to separate personal preference, while the Brewing Cup competition score sheet is quite complex and the 6 different categories is a little bit, it's like quite a lot, I think it is really important to separate your flavor experience. So it's not just, I love this, I don't love this. It's like, okay, why do you love this? Is it the acid? Is it the aftertaste? Is it the mouthfeel? And by being able to separate your experience, you can be a bit more objective. So I'm a firm believer that you should never really be able to, you shouldn't taste a coffee and say, this is awful, this is terrible. That's not useful. That's not entirely, it's just not useful to anyone. It's not productive. So being able to separate, okay, I don't like the flavor of this coffee. I think the flavor definition is pretty muddled. However, the mouthfeel and its coating elements I find quite appealing. It's quite interesting. And I like that it's got a long and lingering aftertaste. So we can give we can separate our experience and we can understand why we have a personal preference. But to remove the bias, honestly, blind tasting is the only way. So if you brew a coffee and your barista friend brews another coffee, the exact same coffee, trying to get another colleague to hide them or change their cups or to remove that bias, I think is really important. And this is how you get humbled by coffee. And I think being humbled by coffee is a really good thing. Just when you think that you've figured it all out, you think you're the best barista in the place, and then you keep losing the battle with,
To Ben's question, do you think that like when as you become a more pro brewer and you're competing, that the idea of what a coffee should be, do you reckon personal preference maybe goes out the window and you fall into line with what is expected? Because I know here we have a lot of staff who aren't coffee professionals and you'll give them all the same coffee And one's like, oh yeah, it's an acid bomb. I love it. And someone is like, I hate this because of the acid. Like there's such a differentiation. So, ideally if one of those people went into a competition to make coffee and they love it really acidic or whatever it is, and they push it down that lane, it's going to score poorly. Is that kind of where, like, do you think as you get better and better, you just fall into line with what a coffee should taste like in that balance?
Tricky, hey, because like in this case, we're talking, I guess, about one competition body and one score sheet, right? So it does inform a lot of what we do as an industry and at home brewers. And it is hard not to just be like, I just need to go really clean Panamanian geisha, but that's easier said than done. You can't just fall upon a very clean Panamanian geisha at any moment that you want to. So the way that I go about kind of resisting that urge to just fall in line is I want a reason to do these competitions. I want a reason to brew coffee every single day. And usually that's going to be a coffee that sparks my interest. That's I want to share it with my friends. Like, hey, you got to try this coffee. You have to try this coffee. So I think that's really important. And I don't think it's a good idea if we all fall in line and everyone just is brewing exactly the same way, the exact same coffees. No, we can lean into that personal preference, I think. And we can change.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apax Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apax Lab mineral concentrates. Apax Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. Not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apax Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apaxlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought I was going to say the website. Thanks.
We put so much effort into our espresso, dosing, distributing, tamping, weighing. But then in so many cases, a cafe will just take whatever milk they happen to have available and throw it in and call it a day.
I know, and milk actually makes up 70% of all coffees ordered. So you could argue that great milk is just as important as great coffee.
Definitely could argue that.
Oh, I couldn't, I did.
Our great sponsors of the podcast, Riverina Fresh, have a milk that is made for coffee specifically, and it's used by some of the best cafes around the country and, in fact, World Barista Champion.
Yeah, this gold range that they actually have here was designed alongside a World Barista Champion to be richer and more indulgent to pair perfectly with coffee.
If you want to check it out, they are doing a sweet deal for Australian-based cafes, and you can get a free trial.
That's exactly right. You can get a free trial straight to your door. Just head to riverinafresh.com.au and see if your cafe is eligible. And why wouldn't you? Serve up the same milk as World Barista Champions.
I think for me, the kind of conversation about this is as you get more and more into filter coffee, I think we as an industry can kind of fall into our little bubble of here's the on-trend thing. We've been exposed to all these different things. We go, wow, that's super distinctive. But it's always kind of coming back to, is it just for you? Because if you're brewing the coffee and it's just for you to drink and you're just at home, great.
Yeah.
You do what you want and you'll get the exact result you want, which is great. But then if you're serving it out in a cafe, so if you're a head barista and you're brewing up and you're tasting in order to make the connection with a consumer, this is where I think, building up your sensory language and the terminology so that you can say, oh, this is acid, this is sweet, this is body, this is aftertaste, and some terminology that is accessible by the audience. I think that's a critical skill to kind of build up so that then you're tasting it and like you're saying, a little bit of that humility of put it in front of the customer and ask them, what are they tasting? Because you might find that the language or the flavors or the clarity is kind of overblown. It's like when we used to buy Cup of Excellence coffees that would come with 30-word taste descriptors. And it's you can taste that coffee and maybe in a particular moment with particular variables, you'll get that one flavor note. But if you keep passing it over the counter and saying, here's this thing, they might, customers taste it and go, no, I don't get any of that damn lavender.
And the number one thing I would say, especially if you're not like a pro, but you're someone who loves something, same thing goes for food as coffee, in my opinion. If you give me a coffee, you tell me an experience that I then have, even if I don't like the experience, I appreciate it because I'm like, that's what they said.
Yep.
Whereas when I get stuff and it's like, I'm reading it going, what? Really? Even if the coffee's kind of, I'm like, that's not what I'm having. And it kind of throws me out. Like I've had plenty of times at really expensive restaurants where they bring something out, tell me the story behind it, and I eat it. And there's elements of it that I don't really like or textural experiences, but I'm like, it is what they said, Yeah.
I think it's really, context is really important. That's one thing you're touching on, right? It's like if it's in the cafe, if it's at home, if it's a competition, what's the context of this?
Yeah.
And in the cafe, I encourage anyone that I work with to not oversell, right? So that's what you're talking about. Just like, oh, it doesn't really taste like lavender, right? So one thing that I find really interesting is color and quality of fruit. So pretty much every specialty coffee has a fruit element, has citric acid. So it could be incorrect to be really specific with our flavor descriptions. It could be a lot more correct to reference a color and a quality of fruit. So yellow tropical fruit might be more accurate than pineapple. Sounds kind of crazy because you can see the easy link there, but this is true for pretty much every coffee. So you'll see on some of our bags at Code Black where we have citrus as like a leading flavor quality. It's like that's pretty general, right? But that's what we are trying to communicate in a very specific way, which is like this has a general citrus quality. And it's not pineapple. It's more general. So you can be hyper accurate by being more general when it comes to these sorts of things. Otherwise, you alienate people. You make them feel like they're wrong or they're not getting it right. That's not good.
Now, you've touched on a few things. We talked about dialing in before and tips about going through that process. Does it change at all when you're looking at the world stage? Like, what are some of the dialing in protocols you use when working on the world stage? Is there anything for a home brewer or a cafe brewer that could kind of be applied? I think the sorting and the pre and post is huge. I think that's a great one that you can kind of start applying. Is there anything else that listeners should be looking at?
It's a pretty crazy world. There are two parts of the Brewing Cup competition, right? There's the open service, the presentation that everybody kind of sees. And that is a competition of sourcing the most incredible coffees and then like roasting and sorting, really. Like that's what that is. And then it's presenting it in a way that makes sense, that judges can score you well for. Now, what we do for open service is crazy levels of like finesse, right? So we're talking about like intense sorting, intense post-grind management, intense roast control. These are all pretty strange for the home brewer, right? We're not really in this space. So in terms of learning for open service, I would say just being really precise like can help. Like, so with my pours, with my ratio, like that, it just get my technique right. Like that sort of stuff can help. But the other part of competition, the compulsory round of Brewers Cup, the mystery coffee round, I think there's a lot to be learned from that round. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to watch and it's not real. There's no commentary or anything on it. So it usually gets forgotten about.
This is where everyone's given the same coffee. You all have to brew with the same thing.
Yeah, so I call it the mystery coffee round for anyone who's not really in the competition world, where we all get a coffee that we don't know, we've never brewed before. We all get the same amount of time. It's like 45 minutes to brew our best version. This is, I think, where a lot of really interesting things are happening that could be applicable at home. My compulsory brews, my mystery coffee brews are pretty silly. By that, I mean, I'm using like a 30-gram dose and a 200-gram like amount of water. I'm creating a bypass concentrate. I'm creating a concentrate that I then bypass to try to balance out. This is fairly common in that space, but we learn a lot through always approaching a random coffee.
And for people, just clarifying, so that's making like a concentrate and then adding water afterwards to kind of dilute it to your desired TDS or to your desired level strength.
That's right. Balance it out. And I think that this is useful for home as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you finish your brew and it's tasting a little bit intense, add a little bit more water. We call this bypassing. It's very valid. That is the first way that you can do it, and that's okay. Another way you can do it is you can intentionally make it very intense, lower your ratio pretty substantially, all the way down to 1:6 in some crazy situations. I brew like 1:6 or 1:8 with like a minute contact time. And then I get this really concentrated liquid that I then bypass equal parts water. This is a viable way to extract too. It is more useful with coffees that you don't want to extract too well. So if you have done your first assessment of a new coffee and it doesn't taste as good as you would like, or you think, I don't really like all these flavors here, you could do a hyper concentrate like this, balance it out with water, and you could actually have a pretty compelling cup.
Cool. So if you get something that's not great, not hitting the mark, actually a bypass method might present a more balanced final cup.
Yeah, especially if the coffee is fairly low in acid and you want to bring out some sort of balance through that way.
Yep.
By intentionally under-extracting like this, it's really under-extraction, creating a concentrate, you can create this sort of magical brew that does have acid in it and balance it out.
So for a layman's term, if we're looking at doing halving the ratio of doing that like 1:8, what is that type of brewing going to bring out and not bring out compared to if you were just doing it in a normal 1:16?
Sure. So if you drink that concentrate at 1:8, it's going to taste very under-extracted and very intense. So very acidic.
Yep.
It's going to be very heavy body. So it's going to be coating. It's going to be hard to drink. It's too strong.
But we're leaving out undesirables that we would have got from an average
further
coffee.
Extraction.
Yeah. So if we kept extracting that coffee or we did a more standard ratio, we might get a lot more of those dark chocolate, bitter notes, dry distillates, these things that are not very tasty. Mm-hmm. We can pretty much just cut the extraction at a certain point and then we can balance that out with water.
Yeah, cool. That's a fun thing for people to try at home as well. Just even if it's whatever coffee it is, just try it side by side, doing a regular ratio and then trying it with bypass just to see what the differences are, would be something fun to try. Would you do same grind size and everything if you're at home trying that out, or how would you adjust if you were doing the bypass?
I go coarser.
Coarser.
Yeah, so go coarser and more concentrated and then brew for like a minute or two.
Yep.
And then you'll have this liquid that you'll be able to just bypass taste until you're happy with it. That's a good skill to develop.
And then question on the compulsories as someone that's been competed at the Brewers. When we look at the barista, how do you feel about the barista side not having that kind of compulsory round where you just throw in a coffee? Do you think it should be added or shouldn't be?
It's a good question. I find it fascinating, first of all, coming from brewers and then dipping my toe in baristas. I find it almost crazy that there's not a mystery coffee round. Because I do think that the skill is approaching a unknown coffee, a new coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you're brewing the best coffees in the world, you're always going to taste pretty good.
I think I agree. I think I said on the pod once that I'm like, any trained monkey could become the barista champion if you had the right people behind you. I said it.
Yeah, you said it.
No, I meant it in the way of you could technically get someone with very little professional skill and train them into doing the routine and getting there. Obviously there are things that you need to understand, but I feel like there's more of a skill in taking a brand new coffee and having to make it as best as you can in that moment. I feel like that kind of really brings the real true barista skill to the competition.
I find myself calling open service competition more of a dance than anything else. Yeah. And it is a hard dance. to give full credit. Like the what you need to achieve in those 10, 15 minutes is extremely difficult. It requires a lot of preparation, and there's so much work that obviously goes behind it. But once you get to stage, once you have your coffee ready, once you have all your things set up, it's a preparation competition. Everything is in place. Then it's a dance. So that's when the trained monkey maybe could come in. But it's like all of that stuff before is actually the competition. That final dance you need to nail, and it's really high stress, high pressure situation, but it is a dance.
Yeah, cool. And so we talked like just then with the bypass, that's a great little technique for testing out if you've got like a lower grade coffee. And I think we talked about your journey into the worlds for dialing in expensive coffees and fancy coffees, which we're seeing more and more on the cafes, on cafe menus as well. So I guess people should take those tips as like how to dial in the super expensive coffees.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now that you can buy like frozen single doses and that you're like, oh God, I've got one chance with this $40 dose or whatever.
Yeah, you want to treat it seriously when it's a very expensive single shot. But you know, when we look at the cafe systems, I know you do a lot of training with baristas who are obviously professional baristas, and you Code Black wholesales a lot to cafes who are setting up filter systems. A lot of them, I feel like a filter coffee system isn't really set up very well for consistency. So from your perspective, what does a great cafe filter setup look like? Maybe a little bit of the equipment, but the workflow and the other preparation.
I think that a great cafe filter system includes batch brew and a batch brew choice of delicious coffee. To maintain the quality of your batch brew, I think brewing fresh, of course, making sure it's still tasty by the time you serve it is super, super important. So having quality standards there. Having a choice between like a more, like, hey, would you like a more intense, like fruity experience, or would you like a cleaner, more floral expression? Like that's really compelling as a customer. So I think that's an example of excellence. And then on top of that, it's high-end exotic coffees in a single serve pour over. So it's like offering that elevated experience of like, hey, you want to try some of the best coffees in the world? This is how we do it. So that's what I think an excellent filter program like looks like in a cafe. It's confident batch brew that's always high quality, and then it's also those special top-end offerings.
Yeah, and aside, I guess, from the coffees, which is great to hear you put so much focus on just get great coffee, what else would be the things that a cafe owner or a head barista would need to focus on setting up to kind of launch that program? Like, is there particular systems or like quality control approaches, or like, especially for single serve coffees, is there like a workflow or a space management that kind of can really help?
Oh, sure. Well, you definitely need a single dose grinder, right? So we're not hand grinding in a cafe. It's too slow. So you need a single dose grinder. You ideally have pre-dosed portions. So you don't want someone to be like, oh, I think I'll have a pour over today. And you're like, oh no, I need to like weigh out all my coffee. I need to find some coffee. I need to find the kettle. Like everything needs to be set up, ready to go. So just like we would at home, right? We need our kettle ready. We need good water. We need to get that hot as soon as possible. We ideally have a pre-dosed amount of freshly roasted coffee. So all we need to do is find our grind size, which we would have already decided on based on our 1 or 2 dial-in brews. And then we grind it, and then we brew. We need to make sure that we have our equipment, our scale, our brewer, our paper all within reach. Ideally, you don't need to move too much, like one step here, one step there. Ideally, when a customer is ordering this top shelf coffee, we want to give them more than just, hey, here's your coffee, see you later. Yep. So a space or to encourage the customer to be part of it. By that, I mean like, hey, would you like to smell the aroma of the dry fragrance of this coffee? This starts the connection. So if you want to come over with me, we can brew it together. And it's talking to the customer, communicating that value. Otherwise, we may miss that point of connection.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to have in place. And I think that's how can be executed.
I love that. Yep.
But let's look at the skill level of the barista doing it and that, like, because sometimes it's hard having 7 days a week. Who are the best baristas that are on and doing it? How do you set up a training program to make sure that baristas are delivering on these expensive high-end coffees in a way that you want?
Sure. So I think it's a lot about calibration, first of all. Calibration within the business or the cafe. It's important that we at Code Black are calibrated to each other. It's not necessarily important that we're calibrated to everyone in the world, but it is important that we're calibrated to each other. So that by that, I just mean that we all agree what tastes good and what doesn't, really. Like, what do we want this coffee to taste like? So in terms of building a training program, my filter training includes 3 parts. First part is a cupping, which is tasting, communicating flavor, calibrating. The second part is technique focus, so precision on exactly how we're pouring, exactly how we're setting up, a lot of little tips we've been through already. And the third one is understanding which levers to pull, which variables to shift. So by calibrating and speaking the same language, having a similar technique that we agree on, and then knowing which levers to pull, that's the success soup for filter coffee training. But then on top of that, you also need one person, a head barista, to be responsible for the quality of these drinks. There needs to be a clear hierarchy there because we may have different personal preferences. At the end of the day, it's a bit easier to calibrate with all head baristas.
Yeah. Would you also say that one of the other kind of critical parts to implementing a good filter program is kind of that alignment of understanding what we're trying to achieve, like in the service for it? Yeah. So I guess like to that, I'm kind of going like, you know, everyone being on the same page of like, okay, filter, the batch brew is going to be for quick service. It's to help you move like a long black drinker into the filter world, or you might have experienced coffee people who are just getting it for convenience and quick service. It's got to be tasty. It's got to be clean. It's got to be fresh, blah, blah. That's what we're trying to do. You don't need to extend. But hey, we've got a $20 cup of coffee here on manual pour over. The goal with this is not to turn out massive amounts. The goal is to create these hyper-engaged customers. You're going to have like super coffee geeks coming in. If someone orders this, what do we want to achieve as an experience for them?
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, customer service has to be the top of your priority list if you're working in hospitality. So at those high price point offerings, there needs to be a lot of value and like in many different ways. Same reason like in fine dining, right? Like you expect a level of service and that's really what you're paying for. That's where you can communicate that value.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be super powerful for a cafe for sure to get those people on board. So we've mentioned a couple of times the word batch brew, and I think that batch brew's got like a massive potential. It's actually only relatively new to the Australian market, right? It's been internationally in North America and in Europe, it's very common. But, you know, it can be very part of a profitable menu, can be really consistent speed of service. But so often it's just a black hole of murky disappointment in there. So why, Tom, does batch brew so often suck in a cafe, and how can we make it awesome?
I think it sucks most of the time because it's not fresh. I think that's probably the first one, right? Like getting a lukewarm batch brew in a cafe is just such a sad experience. So that requires us, if we are offering batch brew, it's to be pretty strict with our quality control and having ways to manage that waste. Maybe it is, maybe part of your batch brew is chilled and you're serving that as cold filter, tomorrow, rather than doing like a big batch that you're not selling. So we got to keep it fresh. We got to keep it hot. And then I think it's cleanliness of the carafes after that. Like dirty carafes are going to taste dirty. So cleaning your carafes, super important. And yeah, just not thinking of it as a secondary option. It deserves all of the love. We're using delicious coffee for batch brew pretty much in like most situations, right? Like it is a higher quality coffee than our house blend. Usually it is a single origin coffee. Like it deserves all of the love. So give it all the love that you give your home brew.
I like when we had Jack on the show, Jack Simpson. He was saying like they weren't, when they first started doing batch brews, selling out of it. And it became a good way for him to get loyal customers to try something new. Before, like when it was still good, he'd go, great, let's just go around to customers and give them a little cup of filter and go, try that. And away you go. So, hey, you're making someone's experience better. They got a free extra coffee. They got looked after. What a great way to kind of also educate them on different ways of drinking coffee, especially if they just drink espresso.
Yeah.
How do you approach differently? So all those ways of making batch brew better, make sure it's clean, fresh, all those things. How do you differently approach dialing in a batch brew to say like a V60?
I would approach pretty similarly, to be honest. So I think the problem is when people don't. So they think, oh, it's batch brew, so I don't need to worry about the same things I care about when I do my high-end brews. Like, no, that's the wrong sort of idea. All of the fundamentals are there. They're all pretty much the same. There's a little bit less flexibility when it comes to interacting with the brew during the brew. With a lot of batch brew systems, you kind of can't really get in there and do anything extra, right? But maybe more of the more advanced systems, you can change how much water is coming out when, what temperature is coming out. And this allows you to, in some ways, have more flexibility than your home brew, actually, because you can set up to have different temperatures for different pours, which is really hard to do with one kettle at home, right? So this, use it as be curious about it, use all of the technology that is available to you, and think about extraction efficiency and give it the love. Give it a little bit of like post-grinding management, a little bit of pre-grinding management as well. Make sure that everything is in place, and taste it. If it tastes a little bit too intense, you can bypass a tiny bit, like it's all these things that we learn at home, we can do in the cafe.
And by the different pours and different temperatures, is that in a way of maybe you were like what you're talking about with the bypass, that maybe you want it hot at the start because you're pulling out those first initial flavor notes, but as you go on, maybe you want it to drop because you don't want to extract as much in that later stage of the brew.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of the things that I really like doing in brews is dropping the temperature off towards the end to reduce some of that dryness that might be present in the aftertaste. This is pretty obvious in like fermented coffees. Batch brew systems will allow you to do that maybe a bit easier than at home. At home, I just chuck in some like cold water into my kettle and the last pour in that.
Nice. Well, to wrap things up, one simple question I thought could be helpful for our listeners. What is one habit or practice that has made the biggest difference in your coffee brewing journey over the years?
The one practice or habit that's made the biggest difference would be, that's tricky. I'd say one of the biggest breakthrough moments, or one of the biggest sort of habit shifting things that happened to me over the years is understanding that communicating flavor is unique to you, and it is okay to communicate your experience even if it doesn't match the flavors of those people around you. So we create these really stressful, like almost elite spaces sometimes in specialty coffee where it feels like my experience isn't valid. Once you understand that your experience is valid and that your flavor experience is real, then you can grow and be so much more confident with your brews and your flavor experience that you will just get better and better. It's almost like a fork in the road. It's like, can you break through there? Can you like let go of all this like fear of like being calibrated with Ben, or like, can you just like just go for it?
Yeah.
And one of the great things with like Ben as an instructor with what he's doing is like, he is so good at, I think sometimes it just comes down to language, right? Having learnt the words that go with what the experience is, and sometimes underexperienced people are expressing it in the only way they know how. And I think Ben's really good at picking that up, which I would be not as experienced as talking about coffee as Ben. But I'll often say something and it'll be like, yeah, well, I think we're getting that because of this. And it'll be able to kind of understand without having that specific language.
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome, uplifting kind of message to wrap the episode on, for sure. I think believe your sensory experience is true and is what's there for you, and enjoying that and discovering that and adding language and experiencing different things and listening to how others taste in a way that doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong, but just that like, oh, that's interesting that other people are experiencing maybe the same coffee, but in a different way. I mean, that's part of the fun of the discovery of coffee.
Absolutely. And after being uplifting and, great, I think it's time to flip the switch and be aggressive and attacking. And it's time for an extra hot take with 2 sugars. Well, it doesn't have to be aggressive or attacking, but it's just a tonal shift.
I don't know that we'd get aggressive or attacking from Tom here.
All right. Do you have one prepared for us? Do you have a little spicy number you're going to whip out of your brewing bag of goodness?
Yeah, I got some hot takes.
Oh, a few. Hit us with a few.
Okay.
If you're spending more money on equipment than coffee, you don't love coffee. You love equipment.
Boom.
It's kind of hot and it's also factual. It's just a straight fact.
And it's okay. You can love equipment, but
Yeah.
Oh, some people love collecting. I think some people just want a bunch of stuff and to have it all.
Yeah. Remember what's important. It's actually those beans, them beans. Awesome. But you reckon you've got a few spicy hot takes for us?
I could do a couple. All
Lay
right.
down number 2.
Okay. Number 2. If customer service is not at the top of your priority list and you're working in hospitality, you're in the wrong industry.
Oh, yes. I tapped down on that one for sure, for sure. Yeah, that whole thing of like being a good host because you're in hospitality. Yeah.
Definitionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst, isn't it? When you walk into a cafe and you feel like you're interrupting them or like,
so sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for making your day difficult by buying
I'm going to
a
sound
coffee.
like such an old millennial in the way of doing it. I feel like it's gotten worse over the years. I feel like especially maybe it's because of COVID or and not to mention that there are things with payment and, staff wages and all that kind of stuff that plays into it and working environments. But I just feel like 90% of the time now, if I like a restaurant or a cafe, it's just because they're nice to me when I go in.
Yes, coffee quality is not the highest priority.
Exactly,
it's like, do you want to be there? Do you want to go back? Do you feel like you're human? Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that Code Black does really successfully is that, you're there to have a great experience and the coffee obviously is a really strong center point for that, but that it's the experience that you get as a service that's really good.
Number one thing, and Code Black does it, is when I'm standing at that little wait to be seated, someone actually gets eye contact with me, even if they're busy and just goes like,
oh, I see
just
you.
a minute, which is my most hated thing, is standing at that little waiting thing and just people with their head down walking past you, trying to ignore you. I hate that. Yeah, I've always had great experiences at Code Black. They go beyond where it's I had the Finca Zaza or whatever as a pour over. And I was like, oh yeah, that was great. And they're like, oh, can we make it for you as a milky? Try it. I thought it was really cool. I was like, sure, why not? I guess. Just try it out.
That curiosity, nourishing that curiosity is really cool.
Yeah.
And reading me as the customer and knowing that that's something I would enjoy versus, someone else as well.
And, for the hospitality industry and for coffee, especially coffee, we've got to get excited about getting the customer excited about coffee. And if we do that, we're going to be in a good place. Have you got a hot take prepared for today? No, we're just leaning on. We're going to leverage Tom's double hot take moment.
Do you have one, Ben?
No, that's all good. We're rolling through. We do have another little segment though, Tom, at the end of the episodes where we like to provide a bit of a platform for anyone to shout out and share some love. Is there anyone out there that you would like to do a shout out who you think deserves a bit more of a spotlight?
Oh, sure. First person that comes to mind is a bloke named Pat Dan, who has been my coach in competition for many years now. He owns a cafe in Geelong called Vim. This branding, Vim and Vigor, was the OG branding. It really sums up who he is and what he cares about and the coffee that he is presenting. So if you want excellent filter coffee, if you want excellent customer service, if you want community vibes, if you want specialty drinks that are actually inspired and delicious, this place is the place to go.
How does he feel about Pat Dan, was it? How does he feel about having 2 first names?
You can ask him that.
Pat Dan. Pat Dan. Love him. Well, go check out Pat Dan.
At Vim, Geelong, or like a little bit outside of Melbourne. If you're heading to Melbourne, make the road trip.
And to our international listeners, if you come to Melbourne, if you come to Australia, Code Black would definitely be at the top of the list of cafes that you need to check out when you're here. If you're in Melbourne, you haven't been, what are you doing? Well, get down there.
And interestingly, and worth noting here is that by the time this episode airs, we will have a new training facility, a new training center that will be a very, very high-end training center, experience center as well. So, if you want to come and learn about coffee, it's going to be in North Melbourne.
Is that for like either home or is that for anyone?
For anyone,
Fantastic.
But the focus is a bit more on home.
Yep.
But we do have the facilities for, it will be for everything. But the home brewer focus.
Right. Where can people find out about that?
So it's in North Melbourne next to the flagship on Howard Street.
Yep.
So if you follow our socials, I'm sure we'll be already going crazy about it by the time you hear this.
Awesome. Well, check out the website or Code Black on the socials there. Where can people find you on the socials?
Find me on Instagram and anywhere you look, really. Probably through Code Black. But find me on Instagram at Tom R. Hutchins. I can answer any questions about brewing.
What a sweetheart.
I'm here to help.
What a
Nice.
sweetheart. That is very generous. Make sure you go flood his DMs. Just slide on in there and find out about what filter paper you should be getting if you want to just, increase your extraction speed.
Extraction efficiency, mate.
Yeah.
It's all about the extraction efficiency.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That was an amazing masterclass that people are going to learn so much from. Thank you guys for joining us. As always, if you enjoy these kind of episodes, these masterclass, send this to someone who's a home brewer or a barista wanting to up their game. Maybe someone that's wanting to look at getting into competition. Please subscribe. It really helps us out. We're doing our best here, 2026, getting the biggest and best names on the show. If you have any questions, you can always email us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. You can find us on the socials, It's Just Coffee Podcast. Ben, anything from you for the listeners?
Well, you were telling me about this idea you had that you kind of like in a fever dream when you were getting low baby sleep. What was that thing that you were telling me about before the show?
I was thinking we should just get rid of you from the podcast and bring Tom on as the new co-host. Welcome to the new co-host.
That one backfired.
Hey, see you later.
See you, everyone.
Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups, they got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good.